It was my son's birthday, and I wanted to make it special. I had a gift ready, something I knew he would love. I even called a family member to join the small celebration, but something felt off. He seemed distant, distracted, almost cold. I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe it was just stress. Then my phone buzzed. I read the words, "Forget the gift, just disappear." My heart sank. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Why would he say that, on his birthday? I didn't understand what I had done wrong. What I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning, and the truth behind his words would shock me completely. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. Now this is how that day started, and how everything began to fall apart. The day had started like any other, but there was a quiet excitement in the air I couldn't shake. I had spent the morning preparing a small gift, something thoughtful that I knew would make him smile. It wasn't just about the gift itself, it was about the gesture, the effort, the chance to see a flicker of happiness cross his face. I pictured the moment clearly, the wrapping paper falling away, the subtle surprise, and then that little grin that always made all the stress of life feel worth it. I called Sabrina, hoping she could join the small family celebration. Her cheerful voice on the other end was a small comfort, a brief warmth on a morning that already felt strange. But even as she spoke, I noticed my son's voice in the background. There was a pause, a slight hesitation, a distracted tone that didn't belong. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was just work, just stress, nothing serious. But there was something off, a tiny edge to his words that I couldn't quite place. As I prepared the surprise, arranging the gifters just so, setting the small breakfast table, I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting him to call or text. The anticipation made my heart race, a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I had imagined this morning so many times, but now there was a shadow creeping into every imagined smile. The air in the house felt heavier, quieter, almost expectant, like it was holding its breath for something I couldn't yet see. Then my phone buzzed. I saw the message, and my stomach dropped. "Forget the gift, just disappear." I froze instantly. The words hit me like a sudden cold gust of wind. My hands trembled, and my chest tightened. Disbelief, shock, and hurt swirled inside me, each emotion sharper than the last. I read the text over and over, hoping it was some cruel mistake, that perhaps the words didn't mean what they seemed to say. But the message was clear, unyielding, cutting through every memory of laughter and past birthdays. Memories came flooding back, birthdays past, the small traditions we had, the time spent wrapping presents together, the quiet talks over coffee, the laughter that had once filled our home. And now it all felt erased with one cruel sentence. The reality that my son wanted me gone, even on his own birthday, was almost unbearable. I tried to call him immediately. The phone rang, and then went straight to voicemail. No answer. The ringing seemed louder in my ears, a relentless reminder that I was being pushed away. I sat there, staring at the phone, heart pounding, unsure whether to text back or wait. My fingers hovered, hesitating. Every possible reply felt wrong. How do you respond when someone you love tells you to disappear? I shared the news with Marcus, my oldest friend and confidant, barely able to get the words out. Marcus listened patiently as I explained the situation, my voice tight with disbelief and sorrow. He tried to calm me, reminding me that anger and rash decisions wouldn't help. But how could I remain calm when everything I had believed about our relationship felt shattered in an instant? I thought about the past, searching for answers. Had I done something to push him away without realizing it? Was there something I missed, some signal that went unnoticed? Or was this influenced by someone else entirely, a force beyond my control quietly shaping his anger? Every memory I had was now tangled with doubt. Every smile, every shared joke, every small moment of connection, was it all just a temporary illusion? Even as I wrestled with these thoughts, a quiet suspicion settled over me. There was more behind that message than I could see. Something hidden, something deliberate. The coldness of his words hinted at forces I didn't yet understand, and deep down, a sense of dread began to grow. I knew one thing for certain: the morning had started with plans and excitement, but it had quickly become a moment that would haunt me. The gift, the smile, the simple joy of being together, it all felt threatened by something darker, something that demanded attention before it could spiral further. I couldn't yet see what lay ahead, but I sensed that this was only the beginning of a storm I hadn't prepared for. I stared at the phone screen, my hands still trembling. I had read Caleb's text a dozen times, and each time it cut deeper. Forget the gift, just disappear. How could he say that, on his birthday no less? I felt blindsided, like I had been punched in a chest. My stomach churned, my heart ached, and yet part of me couldn't believe this was real. I tried calling him immediately. 1 ring, 2, 3, and then straight to voicemail. Again and again. No answer. Each unanswered call made the pit in my stomach grow bigger. I felt invisible, rejected, and unsure how to respond. I wanted to yell, to demand why, but my throat felt tight, and the words refused to form. Feeling completely lost, I reached for Marcus. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of what was happening. When I told him what Caleb had said, Marcus's brow furrowed. "Take a breath," he said calmly. "Don't confront him right now. Let things settle, or you'll say something you might regret." I tried to follow his advice, but every memory of Caleb from the past few years crowded my mind. I remembered the little misunderstandings, the moments where his attitude had shifted ever so slightly. There were times I had laughed them off, thinking it was just teenage moodiness or stress from school. But now, the pattern felt different. The coldness, the distance, it wasn't a one-time thing. Something had changed, and I couldn't tell what or when. I kept asking myself over and over, had I done something wrong? Something so small I didn't notice, something that triggered this sudden hostility. Maybe it was an offhand comment, a missed phone call, or even something I thought was harmless. Every possibility felt like a dagger twisting in my chest, and then the thought crept in, the one I didn't want to face. Was someone else influencing him? Caleb had been spending more time with Tessa lately. Could she, or someone else, have poisoned his thoughts about me? It was a bitter suspicion, but I couldn't shake it. The anger, the confusion, and the hurt swirled inside me, making it impossible to think straight. I sat in silence, replaying our conversations in my head, looking for clues that might explain the sudden sharpness in his words. Each memory felt heavier than the last. The laughter, the shared jokes, the small moments of connection, all of them seemed to hang in the air, taunting me. And beneath it all, a gnawing fear settled. I might be losing him, and I didn't even know why. The room felt smaller as I replayed the text in my mind. I could almost hear Caleb's voice saying it again, cold, detached, as if our years together meant nothing. My mind raced, wondering what had truly led to this moment. Was this anger his own, or had someone else pushed him to it? Could I ever reach him again, or was the distance now permanent? The hurt was sharp, real, and almost unbearable. And yet, beneath the pain, a quiet determination began to form. I wouldn't ignore this. I needed answers, even if the truth was something I wasn't ready to face yet. I had to find out why he said those words, why he wanted me gone, and what or who had led him to this point. The questions hung in the air like storm clouds, heavy and dark, hinting at troubles I hadn't even begun to understand. And I knew, deep down, this was just the beginning. Something larger was at play, something that would test every ounce of patience, every shred of understanding I had. I couldn't let it end like that. The words "forget the gift, just disappear" kept replaying in my head. I knew I had to see him in person, even if it felt like walking into a storm. I grabbed my coat, my thoughts racing, and headed over. Every step felt heavier than the last, my stomach twisting with nerves and anticipation. When I arrived, Caleb was busy in the kitchen, arranging plates and glasses for a small birthday dinner with friends. The laughter and chatter of the room felt distant, almost mocking. He barely looked up when I stepped inside. My heart sank a little, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Tessa, hey, is it okay if I stay a bit?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She gave me a quick, tight smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe another time," she said softly. her tone warning me to turn back. But I shook my head. I had to try. I couldn't just walk away without at least attempting to reach him. I cleared my throat and moved closer. "Happy birthday, Caleb," I said, my voice steady though my heart pounded. "I brought you something. Thought you might like it." I placed the gift on the counter, trying to hide the disappointment in my hands. Caleb glanced at it, then back to the plates, his eyes distant. "Thanks," he muttered, barely audible. That single word hit me harder than any insult could. It was polite, yes, but cold. He didn't even pause what he was doing. I tried again, starting small. "How's the dinner prep going? Need any help?" He shook his head without looking at me. "I've got it covered," he said, curt and final. The warmth I had hoped for, the connection I longed for, was gone. It wasn't just anger in his tone, it was distance, a wall I didn't know how to climb. Sabrina hovered nearby, her eyes flicking between us, clearly unsure whether to step in. She stayed quiet, and I could feel her hesitation. I understood. It wasn't easy watching two people who once shared so much now struggle with unspoken tension. I swallowed hard, trying to keep the lump in my throat from showing. I wanted to reach him, to remind him of all the birthdays, all the little moments we had shared, but I didn't know if he would listen. I took a deep breath and decided to speak calmly, letting go of any frustration I felt. "Caleb, I know something's bothering you. If I did something wrong, I need you to tell me." He didn't answer. He kept moving around the kitchen, checking dishes, adjusting napkins, his mind elsewhere. I felt a pang of helplessness. I wanted to argue, to push, to demand a reason, but I knew that wouldn't help. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then my eyes caught it, a small cream-colored envelope on his desk, slightly tucked under a notebook. It hadn't been opened yet. My curiosity spiked, and my heart skipped. Something about it felt important, maybe even a clue to the reason behind this sudden coldness. But I couldn't touch it, not yet. The tension in the room tightened around me like a vice, and I realized there was more going on than just a birthday or a bad mood. I stepped back, trying to appear casual, my mind racing. What was in that envelope? Why hadn't he opened it? And more importantly, what did it mean for us, for everything we had shared? My hands were clammy, my pulse quickening, and I felt the weight of the unanswered questions pressing down on me. This moment was fragile, teetering on the edge of confrontation and revelation. I couldn't force him to talk, but I knew that envelope held a key, a piece of the puzzle I had to understand. And whatever it contained, I sensed it would change the way I approached him, and the truth waiting just beyond that door. I stared at the envelope on Caleb's desk for what felt like a full minute. My hands shook slightly as I picked it up, unsure if I was ready for whatever was inside. Slowly I opened it, careful not to tear the paper. My eyes scanned the contents, and then I froze. Inside were several bills, neatly stacked, all tied to wedding expenses. I felt a knot in my stomach. Caleb was using my birthday money, not for something small or thoughtful, but to cover wedding and honeymoon costs. My gift, meant to celebrate him, had been redirected into his plans without so much as a word. My chest tightened, a mixture of shock and frustration washing over me. I couldn't believe he hadn't even consulted me. I held the first bill in my hands, my mind racing. How could he do this? Was I not supposed to be part of this moment at all? The thought stung, sharper than any insult I'd ever received. Every birthday I'd celebrated for him, every small gesture, every effort to make him feel loved, it all felt dismissed in an instant. "Tessa, this doesn't seem right," I said, my voice tight but steady. I needed someone to hear me, someone who might understand. Tessa looked at me calmly, tilting her head slightly. "He's just managing his responsibilities," she said softly, like it was obvious. "Maybe he doesn't want you involved because he thinks it's easier this way." Her words hit me differently. Part of me wanted to argue, to demand that she see how wrong this was, but another part of me realized she was trying to make sense of it, just like I was. I sank into a chair, bills spread across the desk, and ran a hand through my hair. The numbers were overwhelming, the dates, the amounts, the charges, it was all meticulously planned, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I felt the betrayal deepen. This wasn't just money, it was a statement. Caleb had taken something meant for him, and he'd turned it into a tool for his own plans, without me. Marcus's voice echoed in my thoughts. Step back, Ethan. Don't confront him yet. Gather your facts first. He was right, of course. Anger would get me nowhere, but clarity, patience, and strategy that could protect me, and maybe even restore what was slipping through my fingers. I exhaled slowly, trying to calm the rage rising in me. I knew I had to keep my dignity, even as frustration clawed at my chest. I had to be careful, not just for myself, but for what this could mean for the future. I began sorting through the bills more deliberately, making notes, trying to understand every detail. Each one told a story of Caleb's independence, or at least the independence he wanted to show to the world. Then I saw it, a small folded note tucked inside one of the bills. I unfolded it carefully. My eyes widened as I read Caleb's words. Maybe you shouldn't be here. Your absence would make things simpler. My fingers tightened around the paper. The note wasn't just about money, it was personal. Intentional. He had thought about me, and he had decided deliberately that I didn't belong. A surge of emotion hit me, hurt, disbelief, even a flicker of anger. He had not only used my gift but had done so with purpose, as if to send me a message without speaking it aloud. I couldn't stop thinking about it. How could he do this to me, after everything? After all the love, guidance, and support I had given? I glanced at Tessa again. Her eyes met mine, a mixture of sympathy and caution. He's just a kid figuring things out, she said quietly. But I knew it wasn't that simple. This was about control, about keeping me at a distance, about using my own generosity against me. I took a deep breath and pushed the envelope aside, the note still burning in my mind. I had to stay calm, I had to think, and I had to find a way to confront this, not with yelling or tears but with strategy. One thing was certain, Caleb's actions were intentional, and now I had proof. This envelope was more than just bills. It was the beginning of understanding the truth, and it would change everything about how I approached him from now on. And somewhere in the pit of my stomach, I felt the first spark of determination. I wasn't going to let this slide. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something bigger was happening behind my back. That nagging instinct finally pushed me to dig a little deeper. I started asking quiet questions, trying to piece together what Caleb had been doing while I thought everything was normal. And then I found out, the meeting with Mr. Donovan, he had met with him, secretly. Without me, every discussion about the wedding, every decision about the money, every plan, it had all happened without me knowing. My chest tightened as the reality hit me. Caleb had been deliberately keeping me in the dark. I wasn't just being overlooked, I was being excluded. Every effort I had made, every gesture, every word of guidance, it had been ignored. I felt a sharp twist in my gut. How long had this been going on? How many times had he manipulated the story to make it seem like I wasn't involved? Caleb had painted a picture for everyone else, making it look like I didn't care, like I wasn't part of this family moment, and I had fallen right into the trap. The betrayal stung worse than I could have imagined. Tessa's words echoed in my mind from earlier. You know, if you showed up too much, you'd just complicate things, she said casually, like it was a simple fact. But now I realized she had been hinting at the real truth. My presence would have challenged Caleb's carefully built image, and she knew it. I couldn't tell if she was being helpful or just another piece in the puzzle. I sank into my chair, head spinning. My own son, my Caleb, had chosen to sideline me. And for what? Control? Appearances? Money? I felt a mix of shock, anger, and hurt swirling inside me, clawing at my chest. It wasn't just about being left out. It was about trust, about years of believing we shared a bond that now seemed fragile, even fake. Marcus called me later that evening, his voice calm but firm. Ethan, you have to be careful. This isn't just about being hurt, it's about timing. You need to plan your steps carefully. Don't react blindly. His words made sense, but the anger inside me was fierce. Every instinct screamed at me to confront Caleb right now, to demand answers, to show him how wrong he was. But Marcus was right. I had to think strategically. I looked back at the bills and contracts I had started collecting, my fingers brushing over the envelope again. That's when I noticed it, a tiny folded piece of paper hidden between the pages of the wedding contract. My heart raced as I opened it. There it was, a clause buried in legal language, something that could affect my finances significantly if left unchecked. Caleb hadn't just taken my gift money, he had maneuvered to put me at a disadvantage financially. I sank back, feeling a deep pang of guilt. How had I missed the signs? How had I trusted him blindly, assuming he would always act openly, honestly? I had let him manipulate the situation without realizing it, and now the consequences were staring me in the face. But amid the hurt and anger, a spark of resolve ignited. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was a chance to protect myself, to regain influence, to show Caleb that exclusion and manipulation had limits. I had proof now, and with Marcus's guidance, I could approach this carefully, without losing control. I took a deep breath, steadying my hands. I wasn't sure what Caleb's next move would be, but I knew one thing: the game had changed. He had underestimated me, and he had underestimated the consequences of keeping a father out of his life. The next steps had to be precise, deliberate, and unrelenting. As I stared at the hidden clause again, my mind raced with possibilities. How could I use this? What could I reveal to shift the balance back? The answer wasn't clear yet, but one thing was certain: this betrayal wasn't the end. It was the spark that would ignite the fire of the next chapter. After discovering the hidden clause, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. I needed guidance. I couldn't face this alone. I called Marcus and told him everything, about the envelope, the bills, and the contract clause. I didn't hold anything back. Marcus listened quietly, then spoke with that calm, steady voice I trusted. "Ethan, first breathe. You can't react emotionally. This isn't about anger, it's about strategy. You need to protect yourself legally and emotionally. Document everything. And avoid direct confrontation with Caleb for now." His words made sense, but I felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief that I wasn't entirely alone, and frustration because I wanted to confront Caleb right now. I could see his face in my mind, smug, thinking he could manipulate me without consequences. Next, I reached out to Sabrina. I needed to know if Caleb had been influencing her too. I called her carefully, choosing my words, trying not to sound accusatory. She answered, and I could hear the hesitation in her voice. I don't really know, Ethan. I want to be fair to both sides. I trust you, but I also see his point sometimes. I'm just confused. Her words made my chest tighten. She wasn't against me, but she wasn't fully on my side either. I realized that in order to protect myself, I needed to be precise, careful, and patient. This wasn't just about money, it was about influence, respect, and trust. I started documenting everything. Every text, every call, every small conversation that hinted at Caleb's manipulation. I wanted a clear picture, a record I could rely on. Marcus encouraged me to be thorough. "Records don't lie, Ethan. If this escalates, you need proof to back every move." Then I began drafting a strategy. Every decision needed to be planned. I listed the steps I could take legally, financially, and emotionally to protect myself. I thought about possible confrontations and how I could handle them calmly, without giving Caleb the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. But even as I planned, a new suspicion crept in. I noticed Caleb had become unusually secretive about his phone, his emails, even small interactions. He would step away when I entered a room, delete messages quickly, and look over his shoulder more than usual. Something was being hidden, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it was, it could affect everything. I leaned back, rubbing my temples. The anger and betrayal still burned, but now I had a purpose. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. I was gathering allies, documenting facts, and building a foundation strong enough that Caleb couldn't ignore it. I knew patience was key. I couldn't force respect or trust, but I could create a situation where Caleb's choices would expose him. The thought gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. I wasn't helpless, not anymore. As I looked at the stack of notes, screenshots, and reminders I had compiled, I realized the battle was just beginning. Caleb might think he had control, but with Marcus guiding me, Sabrina cautiously on my side, and careful planning, I had the tools to reclaim what he had tried to take. And deep down, I knew one thing: secrets always surface. It was only a matter of time before the truth came out, and when it did, Caleb wouldn't see it coming. After spending the day gathering facts and organizing notes, I finally allowed myself to pause. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. Caleb's text, his cold behavior, the unopened envelope, the hidden clause, it all weighed on me. I couldn't believe how quickly things had shifted. The son I had known, the one I had celebrated birthdays with, had become someone almost unrecognizable. I kept replaying moments from the past in my head. The small birthday surprises I had prepared for him, the little traditions we shared, the laughter filling the room, now all of it felt distant. I asked myself over and over, had I been too lenient, too overprotective? Maybe I had failed to guide him properly, leaving room for manipulation. The guilt twisted inside me like a knife. Marcus had called earlier to check in, his voice calm but firm. "Ethan, I know it hurts, but don't let anger control you. Revenge, if it comes, must be smart and precise, not impulsive. One wrong move and you lose everything you're trying to protect." His words rang in my mind. He was right. I couldn't act out of hurt. I had to be strategic. Every decision needed timing, patience, and careful planning. Even so, frustration bubbled under my skin. Caleb was testing boundaries, pushing to see how far he could go. Every small interaction, every dismissive glance, felt like a challenge. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, to force him to see the betrayal he had caused. But I also knew that rushing in without preparation would only play into his hands. Tessa's presence complicated everything further. She hovered in the background of conversations, a subtle reminder of Caleb's world. Sometimes she defended him, sometimes she pushed him further away, but always in ways that left me second-guessing my next move. I debated whether confronting her directly would help or backfire. Could I expose her influence, or would it only escalate tension? I didn't have the answers yet, and that uncertainty gnawed at me. As I wrestled with these thoughts, I heard voices from the next room. Caleb and Tessa were talking quietly, almost in whispers, but I caught fragments, words that hinted at plans I couldn't fully understand yet. Something about timing, someone needing to act first. I strained to listen, but they paused abruptly. My heart thumped. What were they plotting? How much did they know about my discoveries? The suspense tightened around me. Every clue I had gathered, every record I had documented, now seemed even more crucial. I realized that this wasn't just about money or control. It was about understanding the deeper game Caleb was playing. I had to be ready for the next move, to protect myself and to regain influence, but carefully. One wrong step, and the path I was building could collapse. I sat back, taking a deep breath, trying to steady my thoughts. The memories, the guilt, the frustration, they all mingled, creating a storm inside me. But alongside it, a clearer sense of purpose emerged. I wouldn't act recklessly. I would observe, plan, and wait for the moment when the truth could be revealed, and the balance could shift back. And in that quiet moment, I made a promise to myself. I would stay composed, even if it hurt. I would be patient, even if every instinct screamed for confrontation. Caleb had tested me, but he didn't yet know how far I was willing to go to protect myself and ensure justice. The real game was only beginning. I walked into the dining room, trying to keep my steps calm, my breathing even. The table was set perfectly, candles flickering, plates shining. Everyone seemed cheerful on the surface, but I could feel the tension hanging in the air like smoke. I had been invited to join, and part of me hoped that tonight I could talk to Caleb, clear the air, or at least understand what had gone wrong. "Caleb, can we talk for a minute?" I asked quietly as I approached him. My voice carried a mixture of caution and hope. I wanted to reason with him, to remind him of the trust and connection we had once shared. But his expression was cold, unreadable. He didn't even look up from the wine glass he was swirling. "I'm not discussing anything tonight," he said flatly, barely meeting my eyes. "Forget it. Just enjoy the evening." The words hit me like ice. I had expected anger, maybe even disappointment, but this was total dismissal. Before I could respond, Tessa leaned over. Her tone was sharp, almost accusatory. "Ethan, maybe you should let this go. It's a celebration, not a confrontation." Her words weren't friendly advice. They were a wall, a barrier to make me feel unwelcome. I felt my pulse quicken. She wasn't just stepping in, she was trying to control the narrative, to make me feel out of place. Sabrina, sitting quietly across from us, caught my eyes. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a subtle show of support, but she didn't intervene, didn't challenge Tessa or Caleb. She stayed neutral, caught between loyalty to her family and concern for me. I appreciated it, even if it wasn't enough to bridge the distance growing between us. Marcus' words from earlier ran through my head. Stay calm, don't let anger take control. I took a deep breath, forcing my shoulders to relax and my tone to remain steady. Caleb, I'm not here to argue, I said carefully. I just want to understand why my gift, my support, all of it feels like it doesn't matter to you anymore. Caleb didn't answer. He didn't even flinch. It was as if I didn't exist, or worse, as if my presence was a nuisance he had to endure. I realized then that I couldn't force respect, couldn't force acknowledgement. It wasn't enough to be reasonable or kind, there had to be consequences for boundaries to be recognized. As I glanced down at the table, my eyes caught a folded receipt tucked under the corner of the menu. Something about it felt off. I reached discreetly for it when no one was looking. My heart sank as I saw the details, an extravagant purchase, a gift or an experience charged secretly, and my blood boiled quietly. Caleb had acted without transparency, using resources I had assumed were neutral or even mine in a symbolic sense. The tension tightened, pressing on my chest. I realized that tonight wasn't about confrontation, it was about observation, about understanding the full picture before acting. Every gesture, every word, every subtle interaction at this table was part of a larger story Caleb was trying to control. I stayed composed, smiling faintly when needed, nodding politely at toasts, all the while my mind calculated. I couldn't show the anger boiling inside me yet. I had to wait, collect more evidence, and prepare for the moment when Caleb would have no choice but to face the consequences of his choices. The evening stretched on, every laugh and clink of silverware a reminder of the divide between us. I knew one thing for certain, I had to be patient, but I couldn't stay passive. Caleb had tested boundaries, but he hadn't seen the full extent of what I was capable of yet. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the room, I felt the first stirrings of control shifting back into my hands. The truth hit me like a punch. I had gone over the receipts again, trying to make sense of everything, when I noticed it. Every last cent of my birthday gift, the money I had saved and set aside to celebrate Caleb, was gone, and not just spent. Burned on something extravagant, a honeymoon suite I hadn't even known about. My chest tightened, my hands shook slightly as I held the papers, the reality sinking in. Caleb had used my generosity against me. I couldn't believe it. How could he? All those years of trust, of support, and he had quietly taken what I gave in good faith, twisting it for his own gain. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief, a bitter punch of betrayal that cut deeper than I expected. My pride stung, but it wasn't just pride, it was the sense of being exploited by my own son. Mr. Donovan, this isn't right, I said firmly. Calling him the next day, my voice was controlled, though my mind raced with frustration. Legally, can Caleb do this? Can he just take funds meant for personal gifts and charge expenses without my consent? There was a pause on the other end, a quiet shuffle of papers. Legally, Mr. Donovan began carefully. He has access to the accounts designated in his name, but we need to review any clauses tied to gifts or family agreements. It's unusual, yes. I felt a cold knot of tension tighten. Unusual didn't begin to cover it. I could feel Caleb's audacity crawling over every nerve in my body, and worse, Tessa was there too, I was sure of it. She claimed ignorance, smiling faintly, shrugging off questions with a casual tone, but every instinct I had screamed collusion. Something in the way she glanced at Caleb, the slight tilt of her head, the way she answered before he did, it didn't add up. I turned to Marcus later, laying everything out. He's taken it all, every dollar I gave him, and there's no one to stop him unless we act now. Marcus leaned back, thinking, his brow furrowed. We need a plan. You can't confront him emotionally, it'll backfire. But legally we have leverage. Contracts, receipts, bank statements. We build a shield for your assets first, then we confront him. I nodded slowly. Anger and pride collided inside me. Part of me wanted to storm over there, yell, demand answers, but I knew Marcus was right. Acting in fury would only give Caleb the upper hand again. I had to reclaim my authority, but strategically. I had to show him that I wasn't a target to be exploited. I started drafting mental notes, imagining how the confrontation could unfold. Each scenario sharpened my mind. I thought about boundaries, leverage, timing. Caleb needed to feel the weight of his choices without me losing control. Every detail mattered. Then a text arrived, cold, calculated, threatening. If you try anything legal, don't expect to hear from me again. My stomach twisted, a mix of fury and sorrow. He wasn't just challenging my actions, he was trying to intimidate me, to make me second-guess my stance. I clenched my fists, breathing deeply. He could threaten all he wanted, but he didn't know I had Marcus on my side, that I had patience, and that I wasn't about to be pushed aside. That night, I lay awake thinking about the fine line between love and exploitation. Caleb had crossed it, and I had to respond, not just for me, but for the integrity of the family, for the principle of respect that had been ignored for too long. The scales were tipping, and I could feel the moment approaching when he would have no choice but to face the consequences. Every betrayal had a cost, and Caleb was about to learn just how high that cost could be. I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by stacks of bills, contracts, and papers that mapped out every transaction Caleb had made in the past months. Marcus leaned over my shoulder, scanning each page carefully. "This isn't just about money," he said. "It's about control." He's testing boundaries, seeing how far he can push you. "We need a plan that reclaims respect, not just assets." I rubbed my temples, trying to make sense of it all. Caleb had always been clever, manipulative even, but this time he had crossed a line. Using my money without asking, ignoring warnings, and even threatening to cut communication. It was more than audacity, it was betrayal in its purest form. I felt a mix of anger and sorrow, but I knew acting impulsively would only play into his hands. I needed patience. Sabrina stopped by later that afternoon. She had been quiet for weeks, unsure where she stood, but today she offered insights. "He's insecure," she said softly. "He wants approval but also wants to feel independent. He's scared of being seen as weak, so he lashes out. That's why he takes your generosity and turns it into a power move." Her words stung. I realized I wasn't just dealing with greed, I was dealing with fear masked as arrogance. I began drafting my response in my mind, piece by piece. No shouting, no emotional confrontation. I would set boundaries, establish control, and let Caleb see that manipulation had consequences. I would act strategically, quietly, letting facts and patience do the work. Marcus nodded, seeing my thought process. "Subtlety wins," he reminded me. "A gentle push at the right moment is stronger than a hammer strike." While reviewing everything one last time, something caught my eye. Caleb had made a large donation to a charity, and the receipt bore my name. My blood ran cold. Not only had he spent my gift money on a lavish honeymoon, but now he had also used my identity to make a public donation. I could feel the weight of humiliation and audacity pressing down. This wasn't just financial manipulation, it was personal. I leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment. Anger burned inside, but I forced myself to breathe, to think. This was exactly the moment Marcus had warned me about, the moment to act with patience, not emotion. Every move had to count. Every decision would either reinforce my authority or hand it back to him. I decided on the steps. First, I would formalize my boundaries. No more unauthorized spending. No more threats. No more unilateral decisions using my resources. Second, I would gather evidence, contracts, receipts, bank statements, and any correspondence that proved his overreach. Third, I would position myself calmly but firmly, letting Caleb realize the extent of his actions without me raising my voice. Sabrina's voice echoed in my mind. "He wants respect, but he's testing how far he can push." That was the key. I couldn't demand respect. I had to earn it back through strategy, patience, and calculated pressure. I would let him see the consequences of his actions naturally, giving him no excuse to manipulate further. By the time evening came, my plan was clear. I felt a strange mix of resolve and tension. The family dynamics were shifting, the power had subtly moved back into my hands, and Caleb had no idea what was coming. Every detail mattered, every action would count. And somewhere, beneath the frustration and betrayal, I felt the first spark of satisfaction. Justice didn't have to be loud to be effective. The stage was set. Caleb might not realize it yet, but he was about to learn that boundaries weren't just rules, they were consequences. And this time, I was ready to enforce them. I knew the next move was critical. Caleb had pushed too far, and I couldn't let him take advantage of me again. When he asked for more money, I took a deep breath and said calmly, "No, I won't give you any more without discussing the plan first." My voice was steady, but inside, my heart was racing. Caleb's reaction was subtle at first, a flicker in his eyes, a stiffening of his shoulders, but I noticed it. Every small movement, every hesitation, I recorded silently in my mind. This was more than money. This was about control, about showing him that manipulation wouldn't work anymore. Tessa, as usual, tried to stir the pot. "You're being too harsh," she said sharply, her tone trying to cut through my calm. "Don't you want to support your son?" Her words were meant to trigger anger, to make me lash out, but I stayed composed. I had learned the hard way that reacting emotionally only gave him power. Sabrina, standing nearby, gave me a small nod of encouragement. "I see what you're doing," she whispered. "It's hard, but you're doing the right thing." Her support grounded me. It reminded me that this wasn't about punishment. It was about setting boundaries, about teaching responsibility. As the evening went on, I began planting small seeds. I asked subtle questions, made offhand remarks, and let Caleb overhear conversations about finances and accountability. Each carefully chosen word was designed to make him think without feeling attacked. He didn't know it yet, but he was beginning to realize that his actions had consequences. Marcus's voice echoed in my mind. "Strategy, not vengeance. The payoff is in control, not anger." I reminded myself of this constantly. Every step had to be measured, every interaction deliberate. I couldn't let impatience ruin the plan. Then, an anonymous message arrived. I opened it slowly, curiosity mixed with a twinge of suspicion. The tip detailed a secret about Caleb's wedding, something he had gone to great lengths to hide. My pulse quickened. This was exactly the leverage I needed, but it had to be used carefully. I couldn't reveal it too soon, and I couldn't let Caleb see that I knew. I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension settle. The night had shown me a lot. Caleb's patience was thin, his manipulations were fragile, and my own restraint was becoming my strongest weapon. I felt a surge of quiet satisfaction knowing that for the first time he wasn't in full control. Every move from now on had to be precise. I had to observe, record, and let the natural consequences of his choices unfold. Caleb might think he was testing me, but I was testing him right back, silently, strategically, and with patience. The game was shifting, and I was beginning to take the lead. The anonymous tip about the wedding only added a spark of suspense. I knew that in the coming days, every interaction could tip the balance further. Caleb had no idea what was coming, but soon the pieces would start falling into place, and he would see that my calm was not weakness, it was preparation. The night ended with me feeling a mix of resolve and anticipation. Caleb might have thought he could manipulate his way through my boundaries, but he was about to learn that patience, strategy, and careful observation were far more powerful than any tantrum or demand. I had to be careful. Every step mattered now. That anonymous tip about Caleb's wedding detail was too important to ignore. I spent the next few days quietly confirming what I had learned, making sure it was accurate. The more I checked, the more I realized the potential power I now held. This detail wasn't just a secret, it could change the entire balance of family decisions. Suddenly I had leverage I never thought I'd get. Caleb, of course, began acting differently. I noticed it immediately. He was more guarded, glancing over his shoulder more often, checking his phone when I walked into the room. The way he avoided my gaze told me he suspected I knew something, but he didn't know what. I let him stew in that suspicion. Every nervous glance, every slight hesitation gave me information I could use later. Planning the reveal wasn't easy. I had to expose Caleb's manipulations without pushing him into full-blown panic. The last thing I wanted was a confrontation that would give him an excuse to fight back emotionally. I needed precision. I carefully considered how to phrase my observations and which pieces of information to show first. The goal was to make him question his own decisions without knowing I had the upper hand. Tessa, as always, complicated things. She hovered nearby, ready to intervene and protect Caleb. Her loyalty was clear, but so was her willingness to escalate any conflict if she felt threatened. I had to think 2 steps ahead. Any misstep could blow the plan entirely. I reminded myself that patience was my weapon. Acting too quickly would ruin months of careful observation. Sabrina, thankfully, remained a stabilizing presence. She tried to mediate subtly, keeping the tension from boiling over while allowing me to work quietly behind the scenes. I trusted her judgment. Her calm, measured approach allowed me to focus on strategy instead of getting drawn into emotional confrontations. Every interaction with her reinforced the idea that I wasn't alone in this, and that gave me a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in a long time. Marcus's advice echoed in my mind. Timing is everything. Wait until the moment is perfect. A rushed move now will destroy your advantage. I reminded myself constantly to hold back, to watch, to let Caleb expose himself slowly. The suspense was a tool I could wield. I had to let him underestimate me while I prepared for the moment that would make him realize his mistakes. Then a thought struck me like lightning. The wedding detail I had uncovered wasn't just a personal secret. It could completely alter inheritance expectations. The implication was enormous. If used correctly, it could protect my interests and force Caleb to see the consequences of his reckless behavior. My heart pounded as I realized just how high the stakes had become. Every decision, every word I chose could have lifelong consequences. I watched Caleb over the next few days with heightened awareness. I noted every slip, every lie, every tiny clue that confirmed his manipulation. He didn't know it yet, but the walls were closing in. His confidence was cracking, and my quiet patience was beginning to turn the tide. The tension in the house grew thicker, unspoken yet undeniable, as Caleb sensed that control was slipping from his hands. By the end of the week, I felt ready. I had observed, I had planned, and I had allies quietly in my corner. Now it was only a matter of timing before Caleb would face the truth of his actions. The stage was set, the pieces were in place, and the suspense was almost unbearable. When the moment came, he wouldn't see it coming, and the power would finally shift. The next move had to be perfect. One wrong word, one wrong gesture, and all my preparation would be wasted. But if I played it right, Caleb would finally realize that I wasn't just reacting, I was orchestrating. The tension was at its peak, and the family drama was about to reach a critical turning point. I had been watching and waiting for the perfect moment. Everything I had learned, every detail about Caleb's secret spending and manipulations was about to be revealed. I knew timing was everything. If I exposed him too early, he could fight back. If I waited too long, he might cover his tracks. But now I saw the opening. I called Tessa and Sabrina into the living room, keeping my voice calm, steady. "I think it's time we went over some facts," I said, handing them a few carefully compiled documents. I could see Tessa stiffen immediately, and Sabrina looked confused but curious. I explained, step by step, how Caleb had been secretly spending the money I had given him, and how he had been manipulating situations to make me look absent, uninvolved, or uncaring. Tessa's eyes widened. I didn't realize," she started, but I could tell she was defensive, trying to protect him. Sabrina, on the other hand, frowned and leaned closer. "Wait, so all this time he's been doing this behind your back?" she asked, looking at me. I nodded. The moment I saw Caleb's reaction, I knew the shift had begun. He went pale, his jaw tight, and his hands clenched. I could almost feel the panic radiating off him. He had always counted on control, on people not knowing the truth. And now, that control was slipping, piece by piece. I stayed calm. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I let the facts speak for themselves. This isn't about taking sides, I said softly. It's about knowing the truth and understanding the consequences. My calmness only made his anger seem louder. I could see the frustration building in him as he realized that his carefully laid plans were collapsing in front of us. Sabrina shifted in her seat, now fully on my side. I could feel the change in family dynamics immediately. Where she had once hesitated, now she looked determined, ready to support fairness and honesty. Tessa, cornered, finally admitted, I didn't stop him. I should have been honest too. That one sentence weakened Caleb further. He no longer had full control over the narrative, and his influence in the room was diminishing rapidly. Marcus, watching silently from the doorway, nodded approvingly. Later he would tell me he was proud of how I executed the plan, calm, measured, never letting anger dictate my actions. That was exactly what I had hoped to accomplish. I wanted control, not chaos. Moral authority, not just financial leverage. Even as the room settled, I could feel the tension lingering. Caleb's mind was racing. He was weighing his options, thinking about drastic moves to regain power. I could sense the storm brewing, and I knew the final confrontation wasn't far off. But for now, the balance had shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was in command. The pieces on the board had moved, and Caleb was finally realizing he had underestimated me. The family's dynamics had changed in that single moment. I had not lost my composure, and I had made it clear that manipulations, lies, and secrecy would no longer go unchallenged. Caleb's panic was a silent acknowledgement. He was no longer the one in control, and though the path ahead would still be tense, I had proven something vital. Truth, strategy, and patience could turn the tide even against someone who seemed untouchable. Now, the stage was set. Caleb was cornered, Sabrina was aware, Tessa was admitting fault, and I held the calm authority. The next moves would be crucial, and the tension in the house had never been higher. Every glance, every word, every decision from this point on carried weight, hinting at the final showdown that was just around the corner. I took a deep breath before stepping into the room where Caleb was waiting. My mind was racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about setting the terms clearly and reclaiming the respect that had been chipped away for far too long. I had planned every word, every point, and now it was time to act. Caleb, I began, keeping my voice steady, we need to be honest about what's happened. I'm willing to work this out, but only if we lay down clear rules. I could see him shift in his chair, unease written all over his face. He had expected me to either explode in anger or quietly let things slide. Neither was happening. I explained exactly what I expected: honesty, communication, and boundaries, especially when it came to money and family decisions. I didn't sugarcoat anything. This isn't punishment, it's about respect. You need to understand that actions have consequences, I said firmly. I could tell Caleb was listening, even if grudgingly. His posture was tense, but for the first time he wasn't deflecting or lying. Tessa and Sabrina hovered nearby, sensing the tension. I invited them to help mediate. Sabrina nodded, giving me a small reassuring smile, while Tessa's expression was unreadable. Together we worked through the misunderstandings, piece by piece. Sabrina asked questions, clarified intentions, and slowly, the room began to feel less like a battlefield and more like a space for dialogue. I caught myself reflecting in the middle of the conversation. Years of patience, strategy, and measured decisions had brought me here. I realized that emotional intelligence was just as powerful as authority. Rage might feel satisfying for a moment, but control and wisdom would have a longer-lasting effect. Marcus had been quietly observing the entire process. Later he would confirm that the legal protections we had put in place were solid. That gave me peace, knowing that while emotions were being tested, my assets and rights were secure. I could focus on rebuilding the family connection rather than worrying about exploitation. Caleb finally broke the silence. His voice was hesitant, but there was a note of acknowledgement I hadn't heard before. I see now. You've always tried to guide me, and I pushed back too far, he admitted. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the first step. His body language told me he was beginning to recognize my role, not as someone just handing out money, but as a father invested in both him and the family, I kept my tone calm. "I'm not here to control you, Caleb. I just want honesty and respect. That's all I'm asking. If we can agree on that, we can move forward." He nodded slowly, still uncertain, but it was progress. The fragility of trust was still there. I could feel it, but for now, there was a framework for moving forward. Even as the conversation ended, the tension didn't completely disappear. Caleb hesitated, eyeing me carefully. I could see he was weighing every word, thinking about how to proceed. But the dynamic had shifted. I was no longer reacting blindly. I was in control, guiding the path forward, and setting boundaries that could not be ignored. That day I realized that reconciliation wasn't about winning or punishing. It was about creating understanding, setting limits, and making sure respect was earned. Caleb might still test those boundaries, and trust might take time to rebuild, but the foundation was now solid. I left the room with a quiet satisfaction, knowing that strategy and patience had brought clarity where chaos once ruled. The stage was set for the final resolution, and I could finally feel that the long road toward justice and emotional balance was within reach. Suspense still lingered. Would Caleb fully embrace honesty next time? Only time would tell, but the first steps had been taken. I took one last look at the house before walking away. The air felt lighter, almost like a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying had finally lifted. Everything had changed in ways I hadn't thought possible. For the first time in weeks I felt calm, not smug or triumphant, just calm. I had enforced the boundaries I needed. My money, my dignity, and my emotional space were no longer up for manipulation. I had finally regained control without letting anger run the show. Caleb approached me hesitantly, his eyes avoiding mine at first. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. His voice trembled, but the words were sincere. He admitted the manipulations, the secret spending, and the ways he had tried to push me away. I could see the weight of guilt settling on him. It wasn't just an apology, it was an acknowledgement of everything he had done. The walls he'd built around himself and our relationship were starting to crumble. Tessa stepped forward as well. She admitted her part in the chaos, the subtle nudges and miscommunications that had made matters worse. I didn't shout or blame her. Instead, I nodded. The honesty itself was enough to foster a new balance. Finally, the family could begin rebuilding in a way that was healthier than before. Sabrina, who had been quietly observing all this, let out a small sigh of relief. She smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. I could tell she had been carrying the tension with us, hoping this day would come. The reconciliation wasn't perfect yet, but it was real, and that mattered. I felt a strange pride rising in me. Not pride in victory or in having the last word, but pride in knowing I had handled betrayal with strategy and patience. I hadn't let rage guide my actions. Every move had been calculated, thoughtful, and aimed at long-term resolution. Marcus's words echoed in my mind. The payoff comes from wisdom and patience, not impulsiveness. I understood now more than ever what he meant. We sat together for a moment, letting the silence speak. The tension was gone, replaced by a fragile but hopeful understanding. I realized something important. Respect isn't given because someone commands it, or because money or authority says so. Respect is earned, step by step, through honesty, consistency, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. I looked at Caleb and thought about the long road he had ahead of him, but also about the chance he now had to rebuild himself with integrity. In that quiet, I reflected on everything that had happened. The lies, the manipulation, the secrets, the confrontations, they had all led to this moment. The lessons were clear. Patience pays off, boundaries protect, and true love isn't measured by wealth or control, it's measured by loyalty and respect. I had lost a lot in pride and time, but I had also given my son a chance to find himself again. As I walked away for the final time, I felt the story close in a satisfying way. The family could heal, relationships could rebuild, and I could finally breathe without fear of being taken advantage of again. The balance had shifted, and it was on terms of honesty and fairness. I paused for a final thought, letting it settle. Respect can't be demanded, it must be earned, even from those we love most. Everything was finally clear. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments.